And that's the frame that I used, which is that, you know, we are knocking on the door of these incredible capabilities, right? The ability to build basically machines out of sand, right? I think it was inevitable that the instant we started working with fire, but how we handle it is not inevitable. And so I think the next few years we're going to be dealing with, you know, how do we keep these systems under control that are highly autonomous and smarter than any human? How do we make sure that individuals don't misuse them, right? I have worries about things like bioterrorism. How do we make sure that nation states don't misuse them? That's why I've been so concerned about, you know, the CCP, other authoritarian governments. What are the economic impacts, right? I've talked about labor displacement a lot. And you know, what haven't we thought of, which in many cases, you know, maybe the hardest thing to deal with at all. So, you know, I'm thinking through how to address those risks. And, you know, for each of these, it's a mixture of things that we individually need to do as leaders of the companies, and that we can do working together. And then there's going to need to be some role for wider societal institutions like the government in addressing all of these. But, you know, I just feel this urgency that, you know, every day, you know, there's all kinds of crazy stuff going on in the outside world, outside AI, right? But you know, my view is this is happening so fast and is such a crisis, we should be devoting almost all of our effort to thinking about how to get through this.
So I can't decide whether I'm more surprised that you, A, take a vacation, B, when you take a vacation, you think about the risks of AI, and C, that your essay is framed in terms of, are we going to get through the technological adolescence of this technology without destroying ourselves? So my head is slightly spinning, but you then, and I can't wait to read it, but you mentioned several areas that can guide the rest of our conversation. Let's start with jobs. Because you actually have been very outspoken about that. And I think you said that half of entry-level white-collar jobs could be gone within the next 1 to 5 years. But I'm going to turn to you, Demis, because so far, we haven't actually seen any discernible impact on the labour market. Yes, unemployment has ticked up in the US, but all of the kind of economic studies I've looked at and that we've written about suggests that this is overhiring post-pandemic, that it's really not AI-driven. And if anything, people are hiring to build out AI capability. Do you think that this will be, as you know, economists have always argued, that it's not a lump of labour fallacy, that actually there will be new jobs created? Because so far the evidence seems to suggest that.
Yeah. I mean, I think in the near term, that is what will happen, the kind of normal evolution when a breakthrough technology arrives. So some jobs will get disrupted, but I think new, even more valuable, perhaps more meaningful jobs will get created. I think we're going to see this year the beginnings of maybe impacting the junior level, entry level kind of jobs, internships, this type of thing. I think there is some evidence, I can feel that ourselves, maybe like a slowdown in hiring in that. But I think that can be more than compensated by the fact there are these amazing creative tools out there, pretty much available for everyone, almost for free, that if, you know, I was to talk to a class of undergrads right now, I would be telling them to get really unbelievably proficient with these tools. I think to the extent that even those of us building it, we're so busy building it, it's hard to have also time to really explore almost the capability overhang even today's models and products have, let alone tomorrow's. And I think that can be maybe better than a traditional internship would have been in terms of you sort of leapfrogging yourself to be useful in a profession. So I think that's what I see happening probably in the next 5 years. Maybe we again slightly differ on timescales on that, but I think what happens after AGI arrives, that's a different question, because I think really we would be in uncharted territory at that point.
Do you think it's going to take longer than you thought last year when you said half of all entry-level white-collar jobs?
I have about the same view. I actually agree with you and with Demis that at the time I made the comment, there was no impact on the labor market. I wasn't saying there was an impact on the labor market at that moment. You know, now I think maybe we're starting to see just the little beginnings of it, you know, in software and coding. I even see it within Anthropic, where, you know, I can kind of look forward to a time where on the more junior end and then on the more intermediate end, we actually need less and not more people. And, you know, we're thinking about how to deal with that within Anthropic in a sensible way. You know, 1 to 5 years as of 6 months ago, I would stick with that. You know, if you kind of, you know, connect this to what I said before, which is, you know, we might have AI that's better than humans at everything in, maybe 1 to 2 years, maybe a little longer than that. Those don't seem to line up. The reason is that there's this lag, and there's this replacement thing, right? I know that the labor market is adaptable, right? It's just like, 80% of people used to do farming. Farming got automated, and then they became factory workers and then knowledge workers. So, there is some level of adaptability here as well, right? We should be economically sophisticated about how the labor market works. But my worry is as this exponential keeps compounding, and I don't think it's going to take that long, again, somewhere between a year and 5 years, it will overwhelm our ability to adapt. I think I may be saying the same thing Demis is, just factored out of that difference we have about timelines, which I think ultimately comes down to how fast you close the loop on coding.
And how much confidence do you have that governments get the scale of this and are beginning to think about what policy responses they need to have?
I don't think that it's anywhere near enough work going on about this. I'm constantly surprised, even when I meet economists at places like this, that they're not more of professional economists, professors, thinking about what happens. And not just sort of on the way to AGI, but even if we get all the technical things right that Dario's talking about, and the job displacement is one question, we're all worried about the economics of that, but maybe there are ways to distribute this new productivity, this new wealth more fairly. I don't know if we have the right institutions to do that, but that's what should happen at that point. There should be, we may be in a post-scarcity world. But then there are even the things that keep me up right now is there are even bigger questions than that at that point to do with meaning and purpose and a lot of the things that we get from our jobs, not just economically. That's one question, but I think that may be easier to solve, strangely, than what happens to the human condition and humanity as a whole. And I think I'm also optimistic we'll come up with new answers there. We do a lot of things today, from extreme sports to art, that aren't necessarily directly to do with economic gain. So I think we will find meaning, and maybe there'll be even more sort of sophisticated versions of those activities. Plus, I think we'll be exploring the stars, so there'll be all of that to factor in as well for in terms of purpose. But I think it's really worth thinking now, even on my timelines of like 5 to 10 years away, that isn't a lot of time before this comes.
How big do you think is the risk of a popular backlash against AI that will somehow kind of cause governments to do what, from your perspective, might be stupid things? Because I'm just thinking back to the era of, globalization in the 1990s when there was indeed some displacement of jobs. Governments didn't do enough. The public backlash was such that we've ended up sort of where we are now. Do you think that there is a risk that there will be a growing antipathy towards what you are doing and your companies in the kind of body politic?
I think there's definitely a risk. I think that's kind of reasonable. There's fear and there's worries about these things like jobs and livelihoods. I think there's a couple of things that, it's going to be very complicated the next few years, I think, geopolitically, but also the various factors here. Like we want to, and we're trying to do this with AlphaFold and our science work and Isomorphic, our spin-out company, solve all disease, cure diseases, come up with new energy sources. I think as a society, it's clear we'd want that. I think maybe the balance of what the industry is doing is not enough balance towards those types of activities. I think we should have a lot more examples. I know Dario agrees with me of like AlphaFold-like things that help sort of unequivocal good in the world. And I think actually it's incumbent on the industry and all of us leading players to show that more, demonstrate that, not just talk about it, but demonstrate that. But then it's going to come with these other attendant disruptions. But I think the other issue is the geopolitical competition. There's obviously competition between the companies, but also US and China primarily. So unless there's an international cooperation or understanding around this, which I think would be good actually in terms of things like minimum safety standards for deployment, I think Dario would agree on that as well. I think it's vitally needed. This technology is going to be cross-border. It's going to affect everyone. It's going to affect all of humanity. Actually, Contact is one of my favorite films as well. So funnily enough, I didn't realize it was yours too, Dario. But I think, those kind of things need to be worked through. And if we can, maybe it would be good to have a bit of a slightly slower pace than we're currently predicting, even my timelines, so that we can get this right societally. But that would require some coordination that is...
I prefer your timelines.
Yes. I think it would be better for many reasons.
That I'll concede.